All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for coming tonight. I know there's still a few folks that might be trickling in. So first off, we're going to have a couple of presenters. We obviously have Mark Durno, that everyone knows, Tricia Edwards, our operations section chief, and Bill Zawiski with Ohio EPA. Mark's going to talk a bit about the history of the cleanup so far in the streams. Then Tricia will talk about current operations, and then Bill's going to talk about the past, current, and future ecology of the streams. So I know some of you submitted questions beforehand, and we've kind of woven that in through the presentation. If folks have additional questions, we'll have more than enough time at the end for Q&A. So please hold questions till the end, and then we can address those. There's a couple mics lying around for questions. That just helps with, this is being recorded, so that just helps when we post this online so everyone can hear you asking the question. And just hold the button, and once it goes green, you're good to go. So we'll kick things off. We'll pass it over to Mark.
Good. Thanks, Phil. So, as you know, this is the third part in a series that we were doing to talk about how we assess streams, how we assess the environmental conditions in streams, how we assess the ecology in the streams. And about 6 weeks ago, Phil, Misty Allison reached out and asked if we would do a public meeting about the upcoming stream work. And we thought it would be probably a better format to do it here. Invite all of you who've been, who have been with us during all the assessment education work that we've done, and then record it so that anybody that wants to see it can see it. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted some questions provided in advance so that we could address the things that the community is concerned about. And just to give you a little bit of recent timeline, on March 11th, we actually put the plan into action, the stream cleanup plan that we're going to be talking about today. The first step there was to, some seats over here. The first step was to start assessing all the areas of interest, and we'll show you on a graphic what that means. Assess the areas of interest and figure out the initial tactics or the initial approach to doing the cleanup work in the streams. And then on March 25th, we actually started doing the cleanup work. And we got about 5 hours into the cleanup work, and we lost containment of sheen moving downstream. So we put a pause on that activity. And Tricia and the operations team are working with Norfolk Southern to tighten up our procedures so that doesn't happen again. We went a whole summer doing this work and didn't have those issues. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And Christina, thank you for bringing that to my attention last night. Tricia let me know about it when it happened on Monday, and Bill assessed the situation, went downstream, and evaluated the downstream conditions. So we were on top of it, but again, it should have never happened. So again, we're going to really tighten things up moving forward. Again, the first thing I want to do is just go through some history of what we've been doing in the streams. There were a couple questions that came up from you all about the streams, and some of it were questions that we have addressed in one form or another in the past that we'll touch on real quick. And then some of the others actually have to do with the tactics and what we're implementing, and that's where Tricia comes in because she's on the front lines handling that. Next slide, Rika. So again, past cleanup efforts, the assessment, and then what's coming up. And the mitigation plan, as most of you probably know, is online. All the attachments are not included in that assessment plan, just so you know. Anything that included personally identifiable information, where properties are that we're going to be doing work, or where properties are that we had some past analytical work, would not be included in the plans we put online. We protect privacy. There are some figures that kind of show where some of those private properties are, so some of those figures are not included. But the guts of the plan are there. All the procedures that we're going to use, the iterative approach to cleanup is in the plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about what happened in the past. Derailment happens last February. There were two major cleanup efforts initiated. One was dealing with the fire and the aftermath of the fire. The second was dealing with the creeks. And the first step was to assess the problem. We had people going downstream, evaluating the streams, evaluating the creeks from day one. That first Saturday when we could see what was happening downstream, collecting samples that first week, collecting sediment samples, collecting water samples. If you look at the free product analytical, which I've emailed to a number of you, I know I sent it to Lindsay. I know I sent it to a number of other folks. You'll see that the fuel range organics, diesel range organics, gasoline range organics, et cetera, are extremely high, and that was the oil that came out of those tankers. In addition to that, we worked with an organization called Orsanco. It's a spill response association on the Ohio River to assess and protect all the drinking water intakes along the Ohio River. So they were involved in that initial assessment process. The next step was to initiate cleaning, and that wouldn't happen 4 months later because we had to deal with the organics in the water before we could get to the actual cleanup piece of it. Next slide, please. So immediately after the derailment happened, we started a process that we typically do when we have volatile organics in water, and that's called aeration. You remember these from back then. The whole purpose to that is to drive off volatile organics from the water column, but also to introduce oxygen into the water column. That helps speed up degradation of contaminants. It helps with ecological conditions in the water. So that process took place until the sampling showed that those volatiles had diminished to barely detectable in the surface water. Then at that point, we knew we were just dealing with a sediment cleanup. So that step was done. One of the questions that we've gotten often, and we still get today, is why did it take so long to start the assessment that you did over the summer? We finished this operation up, and Bill helped me with my memory. It was right around mid-April? Yeah, maybe early April when we stopped the aeration process. Once the levels in contaminant levels in surface water came down, and we were then dealing with sediment. When that happened, we would typically move into sediment management, assessment, collect samples, start the cleanup process. But in this case, and because the microscope has been on this project, we wanted to make sure all of our relevant stakeholders had the opportunity to review the plans that were being developed by Norfolk Southern. Typically, on a typical removal site, cleanup site, we would review the plans. We might run it by our state partners, depending on the type of cleanup it is. And then we'd implement the plan. In this one, we wanted to make sure a lot of our subject matter experts at US EPA, Ohio EPA, Ohio DNR, and others had a chance to review that plan. And so instead of it taking 2 weeks to go through that process, it took a couple months. So instead of getting in the creeks in April, May, or June, we didn't get in the creeks to start our first full assessment until July and then into August. So that's why it took so long for that process to take place. Next slide, please. Once we had the results from that assessment, we knew two things had to happen. One, we wanted to clean out the culverts again. There was two reasons for that. Norfolk Southern had jet vac those culverts back in the spring of 2023. But we didn't know. A lot of questions came from community members. Well, how do we know those culverts aren't harboring a lot of heavy contaminants? So the one way you figure that out, you clean them out, you sample, and we were also doing air sampling during this period because there were concerns about vapor buildup in those tunnels as well. That activity took place after our Clean Water Act order was issued, which was done in late October. This activity started in November. All but one culvert was cleaned out. Couple notes from the culvert clean out. One, we never saw any contaminants of concern in air during the worker safety air monitoring and our ambient air monitoring around the operation. That was important because that was one of the concerns raised by you all about whether or not the volatile organics would be generated from intrusive activity like that. The other issue during the sediment cleanout, there was no significant sheen generated during that process. So the jet vacuuming that had happened early on seemed to be effective, at least in those areas. But nonetheless, those culverts were completely cleaned out. The one that wasn't was the one along Taggart Road that goes underneath the strip mall where Subway and the meat sales company is and so forth. That one's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of variable terrain in that tunnel, and we were really concerned about worker safety, not in the context of hazardous materials, but in the context of confined space entries. And so we put a pause on that, and we decided we would do that as part of the overall cleanup plan. So that activity is actually going to get started shortly, but in the interim, we decided to put a pause on that last tunnel, and I think that might be that tunnel in that bottom right-hand picture. So that's where we are with that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the other thing that we directed Norfolk Southern to do was to develop a characterization plan. That plan for the assessment piece of it was executed in November and December of last year. Once all the results were evaluated, not only the sheen evaluation, but also the analytical results, then we developed the cleanup plans based on that. Long story short, it was the Sulphur Run area, including background samples in each of the streams, and Leslie Run all the way down to Negley were assessed. And you can actually see all the results on this poster board, from East Palestine all the way down to Negley. And I'll show you a one that shows the worst contaminated areas here in a moment. The idea was have an understanding of sheen generation. We've used this same sheen scale on other projects in the past, and then gone through this type of cleanup activity, and we've had success with this type of cleanup activity in the past. And then evaluate it and do the cleanup in an iterative process that Trish is going to demonstrate here in a minute. Next slide, please. So the assessment, every 25 feet, the sediment was disturbed, and remind me, it was center channel, side channel, right?
Yeah, sides and center, but then we walk across.
Yep, got it.
It's like
A transect, very good. Yeah, so again, getting the sides of the channel, getting the center of the channel. One of the questions that's come up is, what's the difference between the channel and the creek bank, right? We get that question a lot. Where does that contamination set up? So we have a low water mark, we have some high water marks, and generally we consider that the channel. Above the high water mark, we would consider that stream bank. Bill, you're the expert? Floodplain, right, okay. So when we talk about stream banks, those are the areas that water does not influence, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. So doing that activity, we came up with the qualitative assessment of sheen. Then the quantitative assessment was done. We had to evaluate what the risk is to potential human health based on the contaminants found. And the analytical work that the analytical results that we collected back in February of 2023, we saw some very highly elevated levels of contaminants. In the summer, we saw mostly oil compounds with some very low-level volatile organic compounds mixed in. In the fall assessment, we saw basically all oil compounds. There were a couple low-level signatures of volatiles, but well below screening levels. We did see a few oil-related compounds above those screening levels. One area near the Rebecca Street open channel, and another area just south of the water treatment plant on Leslie Run. And again, when we talk about endpoints, we'll talk about how we evaluate the analytical data moving forward. So that's what the assessment plan looked like. Next slide, please. And then our sheen rating system, which I think we have on another board. Yeah, you can see it on the other board. A 3 is pretty straightforward. It's a heavy rainbow sheen. Typically, it'll go bank to bank. A sheen score of 2 or a medium sheen score is we'll see sheen. It's just not as intense as a heavy sheen, but it's still significant. A light sheen, and Bill, if you could point to the little spot of light sheen on that map. A light sheen is when you just get some spotty sheen. And down in Leslie Run, that's where we see, southern Leslie Run, that's where we see a lot of those light sheen events. Next slide, please. Okay. Heavy sheens and medium sheens are the primary focus of our work moving forward, although we will address light sheen as well. And you can see the distribution on that figure of heavy sheen and light sheen, and we actually have a few poster boards here that tease that out even further. The purples are the heavy sheen, the twos or the medium sheen or the orange pictures. And you know, the heavy sheens, again, we're seeing them in very distinct locations. And the very first area that we were tackling on Monday was a heavy sheen area. And once we hit that sheen with extra water, that's when we started having containment issues. And in the medium sheen, you can see there's a lot more medium sheen than there is heavy sheen, but all the sheen areas are going to be assessed. Next slide, please. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Tricia and talk about tactics. Basically, what are we going after, and how are we going to do it, and then more importantly, how do we gauge when we're finished? So.
Are there any other slides?
There are.
Okay. So Mark didn't share his presentation with me, so I'm going to do my best to stay with this, but really I'm just going to talk to you about what we're doing. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Tricia Edwards. I've been one of the operations section chiefs here since last February. I was the unlucky winner to be on phone duty the night this came in, so I was the first one in the region to take the phone call. So it's been a busy year. So as Mark just went through, we're focusing on the next portion of the stream mitigation work to be focused on sheen scores of 2 and 3. And so part of the mitigation plan was written that we were going to go through, and we've already scored it, but we're going to go back to those locations and specifically identify what types of tactics that we should take to conduct the cleanup. And so some of those tactics will be similar to what was done previously with the stream washing. So we typically use like large volumes of water, but not really, really high pressure. And so part of that is we don't want to destabilize the banks. And so when we're going through and we're walking, we just spent, we spent Monday walking the first, I believe, 22 points on Leslie, 19 or 20 points on Leslie, and we're going to continue that next week. And identifying which tactics would be most effective. So some of them may be in this first round like hand agitation, and some of it may be like hand excavating, right? Just kind of removing some of that material where we find that the material's kind of hung up in some sediment or within rocks, or utilizing that pressured water to clean it from the banks. So that idea is we want to liberate that sheen, kind of flush it off of that. But downstream of that, and which is what we had issues with on Monday that Mark mentioned, was we have set up different stages for collection. So initially with what was set up on Monday was they had a redundant, so they had, I wish I had pictures, I'm sorry, 3 what we call petroleum fences. And so they stand about 3 foot high. They're put into, they're staked across the channel, and they're in a series of 3. And then there's the containment boom. And then in front of the containment boom, and the containment boom is like plastic, and it has a skirt to it. So water can flow beneath it, but anything up on the surface, the sheen that is floating, would back up behind it. And then we have sorbent boom that would actually absorb that sheen so that we can collect it. It also allows that sheen to back up behind those containment booms so that we can also utilize mechanical measures like a vac truck to actually skim it off of the surface. So we had those multiple layers in place on Monday, and so they had gotten started, and they were in an area where they were actually generating a lot of sheen with the amount of work that they were doing. And they were just using that water, and so they actually were trying to be more aggressive, and so they started up a secondary pump, and started hitting it even harder. And by doing so, they generated a lot more volume of water. And so what happened was it actually went around the control measures that were put in place. So what had happened at that point was crews identified the problem. Our folks that were in the field doing oversight identified the problem, and we shut the work down. But at that point, a good deal of material had already gone downstream. So moving forward, we've actually been identifying multiple series of redundancy that will be put in place moving forward. So instead we're going to have a vac truck at our layers downstream, and we may actually have 2 vac trucks staged downstream, and then at those points, those vac truck operators will actually be spotters. So they'll continue to observe that waterway just to ensure that we haven't disturbed anything that has gotten past our containment. The other thing that we've looked into, some suggestions that we had made as well, was considering something like it's called a Watergate dam. So it's a dam it's actually, we just bought one in the region. We use them for training, but they pop up pretty easy, and you can open some of these gates to allow water to flow, but it allows us to control that water. Can you go to the next slide? I don't know what's next, but we'll try it. Okay. So part of what happens is all of our containment that we set up is great if it's really still water or if it's really slow moving. The problem is, in any situation, if we get it fast water, it's really difficult for us to manage. And so there'll be, if we have rain events, we're not going to be able to continue that work because the water in those creeks moves so quickly that we just won't be able to manage that containment in place. So those decisions, like today was an example. The rain event from yesterday had passed, and it was sunny and it was beautiful this morning, but there was still so much flow in that creek that we were not able to set up and continue operations, which we weren't ready to after Monday anyway. But those are the types of things, as the operations section chief, and then this is Shanna Horvaton, our safety officer. We make those determinations whether or not that we can proceed with that type of work. So moving forward, we are definitely enforcing that we have to have much more redundancy in all of their containment measures. We're actually looking at some additional types of equipment that I've used. I was a contractor in my previous life, so I actually have made some suggestions to try that will be, I think, that might be more effective with this type of sheen. So can you go back one? Thank you. So get my bearings. So tomorrow, as Mark alluded, so right now we are on a pause. So for the stream mitigation work, until the company can present to the incident commanders and unified command a more robust plan, everything is on pause. So there won't be any stream mitigation work. The only thing that will continue, tomorrow we are planning to kick off the work in Culvert 1. As Mark mentioned, there's only one culvert that we have not completed the work in due to the different varying bottoms in there. So the section in which we have to clean, and there was a picture of a similar type of interior. So it's like a corrugated steel. And in that, there's actually like sediment in between each one of those ridges. So tomorrow's activities, there'll be a vac truck at the end of the culvert. There'll be multiple lines of containment booms set up, and they'll actually be using some material that almost that dams off the water, but it also allows us to route the water where we want it to go within the culvert. So it'll kind of allow us to be able to vac up the sediment without having to fight the water at the same time. I hope that makes sense. So upstream, they'll be channeling the water so that it's not filling up the area in which they're vacuuming it. So on the top, there'll be a vac truck, and then they'll be working within the interior of the culvert, and they'll be actually vacuuming up the sediment so that it really is clean before they move on to the downstream end. Can I go further? Or?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
So this image just shows you how we evaluate. Actually, I do one more thing from you, Tertia. This shows you just, we're clean. Now we've got areas where we have mediums or heavies, and we're going to hit those there. We're going to hit those areas. Eventually, we'll come back and reassess those areas. Once we see that we're done now, we know that when we hit them again on a second pass of assessment, that we may need to come back and do some more cleanup. But go to the next slide, Rika, please, and then if you can talk about endpoints. And this is really the most important thing. What are we striving to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So. And one thing that I want to mention is, initially I had said that our intent for our first phase was to do some like hand agitation of the sediment, turning over rocks, washing them down, hand excavating and taking things out. We're already actually identified an area that we're probably going to need to be more aggressive. So we have to work really close with the state when we identify those areas, and we really want to be conscientious of the habitat in which we're disturbing. So we'll be able to keep you more informed as we move forward with the type of tactics that change throughout our and throughout this entire process. No. That's just in Sulphur, and that's way upstream. Actually, we walked Leslie, and you might want to mention Leslie, where we went the other day was looking really well. So the qualitative sheen reassessment and sampling. So once the tactics have been employed, right, and they're, like we said, they're 25-foot sections. So prior to us starting the work, we go in as a group, right? So Norfolk, EPA, OEPA, they agitate the area and we score it. And so we want to ensure that, we're still planning to employ the tactics that are necessary. So then we go in, and then they actually go through and conduct the cleanup. And then after the cleanup is completed, we wait a minimum of 12 hours or overnight, and then we go back in and we score it as a group. So if it passes, and then we give them the thumbs up that they can continue to move along. And that's the intent for all of Sulphur and all of Leslie. What then will happen once all of the cleanup has been completed in Sulphur and Leslie, we're actually going to go through and reassess the entire system from top to bottom again. And at that point, there'll also be the sampling component that will go into place. So we'll score it and make sure that we're, basically have zeros and maybe a 1 or 2, and, not a 2, but zeros and 1s. And then we'll actually sample the sediment and the water throughout the system that matches the same sampling event that took place last fall. So
Perfect. And I mentioned the exceedances of health risk standards. When we did the sampling in the summer, there were more than 2. When we did the sampling in the fall, there were 2 areas, and you heard me describe those earlier. Why the focus on sheen? We get our authority to do this cleanup, to do oil-based cleanup, based on the Clean Water Act that was amended in 1990 by the Oil Pollution Act. What happened in 1989 that caused the Oil Pollution Act? Anybody know? Boom, Linda got it. The Exxon Valdez tanker spill up in Prince William Sound, up in Canada, Alaska. That was the reason OPA 90, or the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, was enacted. And the primary authority that we have under the Oil Pollution Act for cleanup is addressing oil sheen on navigable waterways, or oil sheen that threatens a navigable waterway, meaning you can float a boat on the waterway. So, it restricts us a little bit because all this, these human health screening levels and things like that, the key for our authority is sheen, right? But under the regs, we're still going to collect samples, and if we do see continued exceedances of human health screening levels, then we will address that. And again, the reality is, if we're seeing it, then we're probably going to see sheen anyway. So I just wanted to let you know where our authority comes from to compel Norfolk Southern to do this work. Next slide, please. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and at the end of the day, you can see the stream system as a whole here. In March 2023, all the purples and the dashed purples and the yellows it was very heavily impacted when you went and disturbed sediments, and you remember that. You remember being able to throw a rock in the streams and sheen bubbling up to the surface. That doesn't happen anymore. In May, when we began some assessment work, we saw that diminish significantly. And then in November, same thing, it diminished even more, or more so. But you also have to remember that the level of effort in each of these was more intense as we moved on. So, in November, we hit over 800 locations. In May, we didn't hit nearly that many locations. In March, it wasn't nearly as many locations as in May. So we're getting more granular, if you will, as we continue this process. Next slide, please. So I will turn it over to Bill for a few minutes just to talk a little bit about the biological part of this, the ecological part of this. You heard those that were at the ecological assessment session back in November heard some of this already, but how do we compare past to present to future? So.
My knee's cracking, don't worry about it. So I was asked to talk about past, present, and future. So that's what we're going to try and talk about. Ohio EPA, if you've been at when we did the stream demo, the biologic sampling that we do and the chemical sampling, it tells us a complete picture of the ecology of what's going on in the stream. So in the mid-'80s, we first assessed the Little Beaver Creek watershed in its entirety, which included Leslie Run and Sulphur Run. At that time, Leslie Run was horribly impacted by a number of dischargers, by the industry upstream, to the point where if you think of the worst, the Cuyahoga River and the Mahoning River were, that's where Leslie Run was. It was ecologically very impacted. We came back again in the 90s. Leslie Run was still very impacted, but it was starting to improve. So there were things going on that ecologically and chemically it was improving. Sulphur Run, on the other hand, because of our assessment work in the 80s, had been reclassified as a stream we call limited resource, which basically meant the impacts of us living on that watershed were so severe it is unfair to expect it to be a normal free-flowing stream like you would see in Leslie. We have all these culverts, all the bank disruptions, so there's enough going on there that stream, just if we asked it to perform like a normal stream, it physically can't. And so when that happens, we assess those streams and call them limited resource. We hate doing it because it means that we've done something as a community that's really impacted that stream. That's where Sulphur Run is. That was in the 90s, starting to improve. And dumb luck would have it that in 2022, we reassessed the entire Little Beaver Creek watershed, and we look for surface water chemistry, sediment chemistry, and the biology. And lo and behold, improvements in the wastewater treatment plant, the industries not discharging as they had before, you now had a system that had recovered to where it needed to be, meaning the lower parts of Leslie Run met the same standard criteria that we set in Little Beaver Creek. It's called an exceptional warm water, so it's the cool kid on the block. Leslie Run at the lower end was hanging out there. When you go up, when you come down the hill, there's that park. Just a little downstream, there's another bridge. It's where I almost blew all the screws in my knee out the first time I was walking there. That was a good one. That stream from there all the way down to Negley is what we call cold water habitat. There's so much groundwater from, we're in cold country, but it's dominated by groundwater, pushing into that stream. It cools the system down to the point where fish and bugs that like to hang out there in colder water live there. And it changes our expectations because you're going to see certain insect types, like stoneflies, different kinds, certain fish. Sculpin is a really cool fish that's one of those cold water streams. So that's the lower part. The upper part of Leslie Run is what we call warm water. That's our default for all the streams in the state. And actually, Leslie Run exceeded that. So 2022, we had a system that was healthy. Then you had the event, which was a spill, a complete kill. So we're not even going to say maybe a fish lived. We're just going to say everything from Sulphur Run all the way down to Negley was a complete fish kill. And then you go, we assessed it again, and it had completely recovered. So in the summer of 2023, when we did our assessments, ecologically, Leslie Run had recovered to where it was. Actually, and many of the scores were a little higher than they were. And that's only because it started out healthy and that resilience was able to be used. Had this happened in 1980 when that stream was already hurting, it would have taken years to recover just because there was so much impact. So that's just a testament to how our streams are pretty resilient if you give them a chance and haven't hurt them ahead of time going into it. Coming up, what's going to happen this year, we are still going to do more assessment work, so we're going to do the ecology again because that's how Ohio EPA drives our streams. We want them to be healthy, and we're the first state in the country to implement rules about that. So Negley down here, there's a site we're going to do fish and bugs. The state of Ohio is going to do this one. We're going to trade off with the consultant team on how we do this. Where the park is, that's at what we call River Mile 19. The consultant team for the railroad, who actually, their fish guy is one of our original guys that developed the indices. They're doing that one. This one is the one that's right where that turn is where we did the demo. That's the one we really wanted to get. That's the only one I really wanted, but then the bridge got dropped in there and screwed everything up. So hopefully there will not be a bridge dropped in the river again this summer, and we'll be able to assess it using our techniques. I already know from what we caught during the demo that fish diversity, it will meet. So that's what's going to happen this summer, and they're still going to do the sites down in Bull Creek, just upstream and downstream, just to confirm where we're at. And then those results come in. We are still doing chemical monitoring, and then as Mark was talking, all this sediment stuff that's going to be done again after all this stream assessment work will give us that complete three-dimensional picture of what's going on.
Do you know where in Sulphur that cold water starts to charge at what either elevation or where?
Yeah. So I said Leslie. So yeah. So this is River Mile 3.3 at the turn, because that's how I think is River Miles is 0 is where it meets Bull Creek. You come down the hill here, and where the park is like right around here. That's about River Mile 19, so you're almost 2 miles up. From here down is where that cold water designation, because you have all these hills, so that's the topography that's pushing all this groundwater in there. And that groundwater, cool water helps streams become a little more resilient. and then you have that different biology. But that's where it starts, and then up here all the way above is our normal stream thing we call warm water habitat.
What is your goal for Sulphur Run, though?
Oh, you
What's
got
your
that.
end goal for Sulphur Run?
Well, so the end goal, no matter what stream you're talking about in Ohio, it has to meet chemistry that is protective of human health and the environment. It does not have that biological requirement, and that's because, not that there aren't fish in there, because if you go in Sulphur, there's fish, there's bugs. It's just physically, there's so much other stuff going on, it can't do the job. So our goal is the beginning stuff. No sheen, no sediment contaminated that's going to potentially risk people. And chemistry, it has to meet the same basic standards as any other stream. A few differences, like dissolved oxygen and things like that, don't have to meet the same standard. But chemically, all the parameters that we're talking about, they all have to be the same.
So, since you aren't quite as concerned about the ecological pieces of that stream, wouldn't it be faster just to do a full-on excavation versus these turn the rocks over with your hand business?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So in addition to the material that's in there, the sheens, the thing that most people would get really ticked off about is if we go through and ream out a stream, which could happen, now you have totally destabilized the banks. And so if we widen that stream and remove material, the next thing that stream wants to do, because streams are not alive, but they're active and they respond. When flow goes down, it's going to start pounding on the sides and dropping those banks in to create floodplain, because that's what streams do. When it's dropping those banks, that's somebody's backyard. That's a street. That's a parking lot. So as nice as that would be, you have to think long term. Maybe it's a short one, but then when everyone's gone, and 10 years from now, when that bank falls in and that street falls in, that's all on the community, because now that's a destabilized stream. And the worst thing you can do to a stream is ream it out, because you have created an addict to forceful management and taken away that resiliency. So it would be cool to do that. And that's why we talked about there are some areas that this stuff is soaked in, and right where we were hitting, when I saw the pictures of the containment booms for the spill, that's where all that stuff first got stopped in Sulphur Run, and it's soaked into the sides of the soil. Yes, we will dig that stuff out, because it is just, if you think effort and what your gain is, that's a better option in a local area that has floodplain versus down in, you got a vertical bank and you're going to just cause the car wash to fall in. So it's a delicate balance, and you have to think, as a stream does, how's it going to regain its floodplain?
And just to give a little perspective, I believe it's the south side of this area we just started working on Monday that looks pretty heavy, right?
Yeah.
And that may end up being the solution, when it's all said and done.
That's what Trish was talking about, a more aggressive tactic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's labor intensive, but that's one of the reasons.
To get there, right? So a lot of these areas, it's not that, it will evaluate them all, but accessing areas can be really complicated, because it's so thick with trees and things like that. And so when we start removing that, again, it goes to destabilizing that bank. And so that's why we really want to make sure that we're only taking those, like I said, I said aggressive intentionally, because I don't know what they'll all be, because we haven't evaluated them. But those are all of the things that we evaluate when we're trying to make the right decision for it to recover.
Thank you. So I wanted to address some of the questions that we didn't talk about as we were talking, and then we'll just open it up. We got a lot of time left. So a question that came in, is there benzene in the sediment? We did see some benzene and sediment at the derailment site back right after the derailment happened. There was a sediment sample that was collected in that first week. We did see some benzene there. We've never seen it downrange from any of the EPA samples. When we got that question, we took a deep dive into both EPA and Norfolk Southern samples. We did not see any benzene hits in sediment in the November assessment work. So there was none detected in those areas, pure benzene. Stream banks. Christina, I think you asked this question. The question that came up, and Bill, you might have better insight on this, but we have the channel, we have the low water level, we have the high water level. Those are the areas that we're assessing for sheen. But if contamination was discovered higher into the banks, well, first of all, we're not assessing. There's no way to qualitatively assess that for oil, right? Because there's no water up there. But if there are locations that you believe there's contamination coming in from, let us know, and we'll check them out. Because we've been up and down these streams a lot, but not as much as some of the community members have. So if there are areas you have concern, take us out there. We'll take a look at it. Let's see, floodplain. Are we doing any sampling in this floodplain? You've heard us talk about Appendix E, which is our final confirmation sampling. A big piece of that was to sample all those areas along Leslie Run and East Palestine Park where it does flood over there. And we've gotten most of that sample data back, and everything at the surface and subsurface are coming back below our screening levels, not just for contaminants of concern, but for all contaminants. So we haven't seen any issues associated with floodplains to date. But we're only about 60% done with that final confirmation sampling, and the analytical work that we have back is even less than that. So lot more assessment work to be done. And then legacy contamination. We get a lot of questions about legacy contamination. So when those of you who have spent a lot of time in Sulphur Run, you'll note that there's a small old tank farm back in there, and across the stream there was an old gas station. And there was some structure set up to deal with contamination that had nothing to do with the derailment. It's just legacy contamination from all that fuel that was spilled over the years in that area. So that when we talk about legacy contamination, we're talking about locations like that, where we know that there have been some historic petroleum discharges into soil that, and at least in that area, we know it's making its way into Leslie Run. But make no mistake, the vast majority of the sheen that we see in the system is derailment related. So I just want to clarify that because we get a lot of questions on that. So that's all we had in terms of questions. So we'll open it up to you all to grill us, if you will. Any other thoughts, any other questions? And yeah, please use the mic so we get the questions on.
So the loss of the containment of the sheen from Monday, was there any mitigation with that, or just it was gone and we're going to try to avoid it happening in the future? Were you concerned at all about what went downstream with that?
Yeah, I'll make the first comment.
Thanks.
Because Bill did the downstream assessment after that happened. I'll let him take it. But first and foremost, that was unacceptable. We can't like you said, we did this all last summer, and we didn't have these issues. And for that to happen on day one, it's just not acceptable. So again, that's why I wanted to make sure Tricia gave you the full picture on what we're doing to ensure that doesn't happen again. Bill, you went down and assessed downstream after that happened.
Yeah, I got this thing here. Yeah, so I did. So you're right. The one thing is any sheen is a violation of both federal and state water laws. So that it went downstream itself is a violation. Ecologically, the second question, am I worried? No. And that happens, you go to any parking lot after a rain event and you have way better sheen going down. So we had a release, work was stopped, and better things need to be done. That's what Tricia's going to be done. But long-term consequences, ecologically, this is nothing. And the stream was already in the we call it descending limb of a spate, so the rain. But yeah, it's just, it happened, and it's unfortunate because there was a lot of planning and work that went into all of this to get to this point. Now, more work and planning are going to have to go further. But ecologically, this is not
And
something.
in terms of visual observation, you went through.
Oh, yeah, so I went to, so this would have entered the culvert, that's C1, the one they're talking about cleaning. So it comes out down on Liberty Street. I went there was no sheen on both ends. Then I went down by the car wash, looked upstream, and if you go upstream, the flow had died down enough. Well, it really wasn't ripping then. The water kind of between where that it comes out from under the house and goes under the road again. That's a nice quiet area, and there was no sheen sitting there. And this was probably 3:30 to 4:30. 3:30 to 4 was when the release would have happened, and I was down there about 4:15 to 4:30. So it would have had time to move down, and I didn't see anything moving down. So
And Randy, you were out there. Did you? Yeah.
was it when did you see it?
Yeah.
I would have to say, I was down there. Got down there during they were on lunch. The first time I went down.
Okay.
Just took a walk around, checked out their containment setup, took pictures and everything. When I got down there was still sheen floating, flowing past their containment barriers going downstream.
And this was at
This is, yeah, it would have been about 12:30.
Okay.
There was nobody down there. I don't know where it was coming from, but, so after that, I left, I came back, and they must have started doing what they were doing upstream. At first, it wasn't too bad. I mean, there was some getting past, but then it got to the point that it was from bank to bank all the way down the stream. I don't know who I confronted about that. I asked him, "Aren't you supposed to be containing this?" His answer was, "We're trying." Well, and I told him, "Well, maybe you should try a different approach because this obviously ain't working." I would have to look at my video because I body cam everything, so it's on my body cam.
If it's when you were there, because I think you left, I got there at 3:30 because we were doing the Leslie Run walk, and they said you had just left. So I'm
Okay.
guessing 3:15 to 3:30 because I would have walked down at probably the same place you were. And you're right, we don't see that level, a good level 3 sheen. Now we'll call something bigger than basketball 3,
Yeah.
but that was
From bank to bank,
going
yes.
down.
Yes, it was.
So that's when everything was stopped. No. I was at the site he was at about 3:30. When I went downstream to see if it was migrating downstream, 4:30 was when I was done behind the car wash, and I didn't see anything popping out at that time. And then work had already been stopped where he saw the sheen, because we saw the same sheen. It was the way they set the booms up. There was coming down, there was that branch, and then it was like a little ripple coming down, and they put the booms there, which was probably not the perfect place to put the booms. And then when you saw it coming down, it was coming around the turn and pushing it into that corner, and that's where it was coming around. So I just think it was not the best placement of where the booms could have been.
It was not, no.
And
Okay.
so
It was, no, I would have, yeah, I apologize, I wasn't on Leslie, I was on the Leslie
we
Run.
were trying not to break our
And-
knees on the street.
Yeah,
But
no,
that's, you
there's,
saw it.
there were some issues, and we appreciate that you caught it too. I did not know about it earlier in the day.
Was this happening all morning? They were doing this. This was.
They didn't start until between 11 and 12.
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't aware of
We didn't
anything
hear
until later in the day. And as soon as I got the phone call, we had just gotten back and we said shut it down. And so, because no loss of sheen is acceptable and everything needs to be shut down. And what I was told from my crew what I said, well, did they shut down? And they said, no, they're trying to add more measures, but they're still, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not acceptable, shut it down.
Yeah, they added another
And-
containment barrier was his answer to trying to control the machine.
Yeah, and so there's definitely gonna be a whole culture change
Okay.
moving forward, absolutely. This is unacceptable.
Yeah, well, I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I was mesmerized. I tell you, it was.
yeah.
It wasn't a
Those of you that watched my video, I do apologize for all the swearing in it, but
I apologize
y- y-
that it happened, and we're not gonna allow that to happen.
okay, that's why I said it was a first run. We'll say it was a trial run. Didn't work right, so maybe we'll try something different. You know.
Well, we recognize,
We all saw it about basically the time you were there to when we were there. It's all about the same time within probably 15 minutes.
it was when they had increased those, and they went from 1 pump to 2, and it just, and you know, it was all kind of right at that same window, and so, but your video, I mean, we saw it, but I didn't see the extent until I saw part of your video, absolutely, and I'm ashamed of that. So and it's not gonna happen again.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'll be
I mean, like,
I'll be keeping track. So.
sometimes, like, I recognize, right, I started my career doing spill response, right? I was the one out there, you know, in waders deploying boom and all of that. And there's a lot of times there's some growing pains, you know, like learning and, you know, getting new people or whatever. But that was unacceptable. Those were not growing pains.
Yeah, this is
That
the
was-
first video for you guys.
Right. Yeah, that was not, no.
Especially after a whole summer.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it was not.
So
It's on.
is it live?
Yeah. It's
You
just
threw it like
yeah.
echoing.
This is just
Hello.
for their recording. It's not for, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for apologizing. Like, I think that's refreshing to hear responsibility. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I just want to, and we're going to hold you to that, by the way. I just want to make sure that I understand. So the car wash would have been like further downstream than this happened. So that was the end point of your concern, right? So can you tell me like where about this containment was set up, that just roughly?
It was way upstream.
Yeah, this was right here.
So
Robin?
I'm like really, like a
Yep, here's
near
the
this building
the-
type girl, so.
The railroad track where Sulphur Run,
Miles, like, give me some.
Yeah, here's the derailment site. The
Okay.
ditches enter Sulphur Run right here. And it was right underneath the railroad tracks. There's a small
Pretty high
tunnel.
up.
Yep, it's literally the start. It was the start. It's the first segment.
Okay.
Yeah, yep, right here.
Perfect.
And then
Thank
the car wash is right here. So,
And so that's why we're saying, moving forward, it's not, they had, you know, this is tiny, but, you know, the containment was here. That's not gonna be the case. We're gonna have redundant containment so that we don't have that, you know. It's water, it's, right, it's moving, right? So there is often a little bit of loss, right, if it gets past 1. But that's why we're gonna have redundant measures in place so that we don't have an awful situation going downstream again.
Right, and so I do appreciate that, but I do have one more question about
Absolutely.
that. Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
So
what
I
we're
know
here
that
for.
mistakes happen, and I'm not like trying to be a pain here, but how did that happen? Was this like something got put up without approval? Was this an approved containment plan by you guys, or was
It-
that kicking up of the pump maybe not?
It was that second pump, and I think the amount of volume of water that was then introduced to the system. So imagine this is gonna be rudimentary, right? So basically, we had they kind of look. There's about this wide, you know, straddling the stream, right? And there's 3 rows, and they're like curtains, right? Tight curtains that will absorb. They're designed to allow water to flow through, but to capture sheen, right? So there's 3 curtains, and they're across the water. So what had happened was, when they kicked up that pump, water started going around those
Oh,
curtains.
no, I have what happened, but I mean, for them to kick up the pump, is that something that you
So
guys
that
kind of
was-
limit in that plan? Like you can only
Absolute-
kick it
well-
up to this much pressure, or you're going to be on top of
All of
that?
that, right? All of the above, yes.
Okay.
Right, so one, we had eyes on it. The eyes should have said, nope, cut it, you just went around, right? So now we have people out there, but we definitely need to make sure they're empowered even more so. We thought they were, but we're gonna make sure they are educated and even more empowered to be like, no, you gotta stop, right? We need eyes on every single segment to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
That's what I wanted to
Yeah.
get to. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
absolutely. So, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, the talking stick, okay. So when, I guess for me, it's kind of a play on words, because when you guys say sheen, we all know that means contamination. It's not just sheen, it's chemicals, it's contamination, it's toxic substances. That's what got through, not sheen. And being on a private well downstream, an apology or, well, you know, it was an oversight, or, you know, this got away from us, doesn't really help me sleep at night. Because if you guys were monitoring a contractor and he had a, whoopsie, this got away from me, you're the guys who find them. You guys are the ones who make the rules. So you should be of the utmost where this does not happen. And that's alarming and disheartening, first off. Second off, the sheen is what we can see. If I give you this to wipe your eyes, or this, which doesn't look like it has chemicals, it does. There's chemicals that are getting around that you can't see that don't create a sheen. So there's more than meets the eye here. You know, and I think it's heartbreaking to watch it happen in your community. And, you know, we have to rely on you guys. We do. And you want us to trust you, but we don't have to. And when things like that happen, boy, is it hard. Is somebody there actually at a point watching, other than Randy, who it isn't his job and he's not compensated for this? Is there somebody downstream saying, whoa, and not just looking for sheen, but actually taking a sample to see what you don't see? Is that happening?
We're not taking samples, no, not downstream, not currently. And there is sampling, there's sampling that goes on, but as part of this process, sampling is not going on as part of this. So actually, the sheen itself is our best indicator for this cleanup.
Because
right?
it's
there's
because it's
always-
visible. Because it's visible.
Correct, right? So, and so that's why we identify it. But the sampling that goes on, right, there's regular water sampling that goes on throughout the stream system on a regular interval. So for the stream mitigation work, we don't rely on the sampling because that is a standard process that's going on all the time. The stream mitigation work is dictated a lot by sheen because it is something that we can aggressively go after because it is visual. So, and I own and I respect and I appreciate that you need to earn your trust back in us, and that and I apologize that we let you down. I know that those are just words, but I have been here for over a year. I'm not giving up. And I want to do the right thing, and we're not going to let it go. It's not acceptable. That is why everything is at a pause, and their operations team has to come back and prove to us that it can be done and be done effectively, or it'll get shut down again.
Now, who is, when you say operations team, who is the operations team? Who does that consist of?
So I kind of look at this as we do oversee all of it. I am the operations section chief, but Norfolk Southern also has an operations section chief. And then there's all sorts of people that work with us, right? It's not just two people in that, but they also have their contractors that are part of operations. So it's Ohio EPA is part of it. Our contractors are proud of it, myself, Norfolk Southern, Arcadis is included, you know, their contractors, which you see out in the field. So there's a pretty robust group of people that are part of that. But it ultimately, like, we as agencies have oversight.
I wanted to bring up too, so obviously there's been a lot, you know, going on in the community throughout this time, and a presence that has been here throughout and taking samples and doing things has been Scott Smith. So he actually discussed with me his product, which, you know, is a remediation system for the water, which I think he talked with you about that as well. Mark sent you an email. Yep. So what he has said for me to throw out there to the EPA this evening is he will give his product to you guys free of charge to utilize for containment. So I don't know anything about it. I know that BP has endorsed it. I don't know anything about it. I don't throw down, you know, collection systems in my yard or on my property. I have no clue. And I don't mean in any way to undermine anything that you guys are doing at all. That's not what my goal is. I'm just relaying that because I think that he told me he also sent you the email that he sent me. And, you know, had it not slipped through, I would not have ever thought like, oh yeah, I'll bring that up. But being that maybe you guys need a little bit of backup, I just thought I might throw it out there. Like, why not put another 16 booms down if it would help catch something that might slip through due to human error. You know, I don't know anything about anything, but that's all I have to say on that.
Christine?
So I heard from Scott earlier today too about his product, and he had told me basically the same thing, that he would offer it to you guys as long as you could pay for the FedEx or whatever, the postal shipping, yeah. And he has shared with me some videos, and he said that he could have it here in 48 hours if you guys would be willing to do that. And I think anything like that would be worth a try because of what we had seen the other day. Even if you are still using your own tactics and then adding his stuff as well, what would it hurt? It's been sitting there for so long. But also, I believe it was the Coast Guard, he had also said had tested that product, and they were happy with it as well.
Yeah, so, you know, absorbent material is absorbent material, and they all have different properties and different uses. I provided that information to Norfolk Southern back in the spring when he initially sent it to me, and then again over the summer. At the end of the day, Norfolk Southern is going to propose the tactics and the products that are being used. We're going to ensure that they are effective or not effective. So, you know, if he wants to reach out to Norfolk Southern, he's more than willing to do it. But we don't advocate for private contractors. So, but if he wants to reach out to them, he can. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with it. We can't endorse particular products.
Even like I know Mark has said early on that you guys, the testing is done by Norfolk Southern contractors. I mean, we all know that.
Oh, and we do 25% quality control checks. I mean, EPA has a huge, robust set of sample results, and that, you know, and it's available online. So I mean, it's not just their sampling. We're doing the quality control.
Well, for my well.
So that, well, then it's Columbiana County, and yeah, that's the county. Yeah.
Yeah, we're told that Norfolk Southern owns them results as well.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that offline. Yeah. So anyways, that's where that is. Bear in mind, we did this all summer long, and we didn't have issues like this. So we'll get this right.
I have a quick question. So I know that when we saw that video that it actually did trigger some traumatic responses for a lot of the residents, and people are genuinely concerned about what we don't know. And so when we see these levels of sheen and we know you're stirring them up and we want you to do that, obviously we want you to clean up our streams, but is this going to have any impact on our air quality, and how can you guarantee that? I don't know the science behind
Yep.
it. I'm just saying we are afraid that the air around the creeks is not going to be contaminated.
Right, great question, Cheney. All of our responders are wearing badges. It's a pretty common occupational sampling device for the contaminants of concern. We also have set up, is it 6, Shanna? 6 air sampling stations in the greater area around the work site. So if there's anything out there, and again, when those culverts were getting jetted out, we had that same sampling going on. When all that stream work was going on back in the summer, all that sampling was going on.
There's both real-time and sampling. So we have real-time monitoring as well as sampling to ensure that it covers more, right, when we do more sampling than what we just see on our real-time monitors.
And the bottom line is the volatiles are all but gone. You know, there might be some extremely low levels of some volatiles left, but you know, the sampling that was done in November shows that we're dealing with polyaromatic hydrocarbons, semi-volatile organics, oil-related compounds.
So it's safe to assume that probably the air is very likely going to be okay.
Yeah.
So
even our
So when you're working
respiratory-
close to someone's home, it's not even on your radar to say, okay, while we're here, we probably should ask those people to go. You're
Correct.
not concerned about that at all.
Correct.
We're in for our safety program, and Shanna, you can speak to it, but we're not even wearing respiratory protection. But go ahead.
So as we're working in these culverts, in particular, because it's considered a confined space, right? And that would generate one of the worst case scenarios for an occupational exposure concern. And what we're doing while we are doing, you know, that work in there, we're not only doing the passive monitoring, we have handheld equipment, both for occupational purposes and area purposes. So worst case scenario, and we're getting in there, vacuuming it up, really agitating it. The person that is standing over that, you know, we have occupational levels that are set. OSHA was out here yesterday and today with me, walking this, looking through all of this, confirming what our safety measures and safety protocols are, because that would be the first receptor, right? The most vulnerable receptor is right over where that work is being done. So that's why my whole responsibility is to, you know, keep our responders, you know, safe. And if something hits that or triggers any of our levels of concern, it's an automatic shutdown of what we're doing. You know, we're a million man hours in, right? And we have had no occupational concerns that have even made an OSHA 300 log. So I would be the first person that would jump and have a concern because I don't want any occupational exposures, right? We're concerned as much about the public as that we are about the responders as well.
And we still, I don't know if it was, I'm sure it was discussed at some point, but so there's still also a decision tree. So if something is on one of those handheld monitors that we get a reading, we also still have what are called our HAP sites available on site that can do butyl, acrylate, and vinyl chloride monitoring as well. So we can pull those samples and run them immediately. So we have a decision tree. Not anymore, because we haven't had butyl acrylate or vinyl chloride in so long. So no, the badges now are the passive that we have to ensure, you know, more like carbon monoxide and things of that nature that we, you know, would be more readily likely to see, and especially in confined space entries and that.
They're a miniature 4-gas, right? Like a handheld 4-gas that you would go into a confined space with. They're a miniature lapel version of it that alarms, and you know, the minute it hits, actually it's like it's a percentage of the threshold. So as soon as it hits a percentage of a threshold, it will alarm real time.
So carbon monoxide, oxygen, the lower explosive limit, right? So if we enter any of those types of environments, that's why it'll indicate time to pull out.
So VOCs and SVOCs?
VOCs, not SVOCs. Correct. SVOCs have to be analytical. Yep. Is that good?
So since everything is stopped because of Monday's overspill, you said you have to go back to the contractor. They have to rethink through the plan, present it back to you to approve it, and then move on, correct?
Correct. But they'll have to present it to the unified, or to the incident commander. We're gonna work with them to try to come up, to make sure in advance, to make sure that that we think they're meeting everything in operations, and then we'll take it up to the incident commander.
So it could be a number of weeks before you guys start again?
No. So the culvert one, we're gonna do tomorrow. We've already presented. No, I'm guessing that it may be Monday, Tuesday before it gets started back up. But I would anticipate that, we have something, in operations that Norfolk Southern will present up. I would think they're gonna try to do it by tomorrow afternoon.
The plan, not the.
The plan, yeah, the plan. So, no. We in operations definitely don't want this to go weeks.
Yeah,
with
and
days.
Lindsay, these aren't complicated, you know. That's why it's so frustrating that it even happened, because
It really- it
Yeah,
is.
I mean, anybody that knows water movement.
I volunteered to scrub off last summer.
That's right. Yeah,
I was ready.
Yeah.
I knew what needed to be done.
yeah. Well, hopefully that'll be sooner than later. Especially, you know, Leslie, you know, is cleaning up pretty nicely. Not necessarily up where you are, but you know, down river. So.
Mark, I got one.
Yeah, Russ.
When you explained to us good how on land you would dig down so far, test, and you would deem whether they need to keep going further. The sediment, how's that going to be as far as depth to know when?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work?
So in the most I don't know how deep we went in the most recent sediment cores. Do you know? I'll have to go back and look at our plan. The one I was more interested in is the assessment we did back over the summer, where we did a shallow core and then a deeper core. And we did see some pH contamination in the deeper core, but it wasn't anything that exceeded any levels of concern.
And when you say shallow and deeper, give me a measurement.
Just basically the shallow one surface, the deeper one went several inches into the
Inches.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, into the bed, the surface.
Yeah, and I know
sediment bed.
Leslie being it delicate, you know, with the system that it is, you know, do you stop at 2 foot? Do you know, what?
So the thing with Leslie is it's bedrock. There is nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So when you look at most of this stream, it's sitting on bedrock. And when we went, the first time we're sediment looking, which was, I mean, I started walking this stream in February for where the sheen was of last year, and then March. It was really hard to find sediment in Leslie Run because there is so much bedrock. So there is nowhere to bury. You know, the best places are, if you look where there's a tree overhanging and there's a little bit of scour there, when the water's slower, you'll find a pool of sediment there. But other than that, even in Sulphur Run, it is really hard to find lots of sediment. You go down to the wastewater plant, because the stream's a little wider and a little slower, and it gets a little more runoff from the erosion upstream. Find sediment there. A couple of places downstream, there were 3 log dams that we found that just by slowing the water down, you have sediment there, but rainstorm will come blow those out, and it's all gone. So this is not a system that has tons and tons of sediment like you would have in many other streams.
I think what Russ is getting at is he lives down in the southern part of the area of concern. The potential for contaminants to get deep into the ground, right? I mean, that's really where your question is going. And and as you said, that Leslie Run, once we get down to that area, it's a gaining stream. So, right, it's more likely in that area that it's going to push out rather than absorb in. But yeah, based on the hydrology down there.
Yeah. Okay. And you know what? Can you go back to the slide where the wheelbarrow is in the culvert?
The wheel. Oh yeah. Rika, can you go back? Yeah. All the way up. Stop. Right here?
Yeah. Now, is that just a picture you use, or that's, I mean,
That
that's
was-
the one that they cleaned, correct?
That one, that's not culvert one. Shannon, do you remember which culvert that is?
City Hall.
Okay. And that's the one that was stripped out and cleaned?
It's been cleaned, yes.
Okay. So the subway culvert that goes under Doyle's, that one
Has not.
has stopped.
That one has not been cleaned out yet.
Yeah. And water would flow from east to west.
Yes.
So if you clean that one, will you clean that again?
No, so that was one of that's a great question, first of all. The culverts, when we flushed out these culverts, we didn't observe any significant sheen. I don't know if we actually saw any sheen during the clean out. I know there was, like it would be maybe classified as a 1 sheen in a couple of these culverts, but they just didn't get heavily re-impacted after they jet vacuumed them last spring. So we wouldn't anticipate it, but if sediment does build up in there, we go in there and stick it around, see if it shows up.
I mean,
again.
I would
Yeah.
imagine you're panning for gold
Yeah.
and you got the grooves in it just like them culverts
Yeah.
have grooves. It's gonna hold.
Yeah,
you know, it's gonna
if we
hold
see it,
wherever
let us know.
washes. Yeah.
Randy, if you see it, let us know.
Yeah.
Well,
You know?
and that's also, I mean, that's a really valid point, right? Right now, we're talking about maintaining controls for the sheen that we're agitating, but there's still sheens throughout the system that we still have to get to, right? So it's not going to be surprising, that in some of these areas that if you go and you agitate it, you might find a little bit still coming up. We're just right now our focus will be the really heavy areas in which we're agitating. But that's also goes to say our endpoints, right? When we go and we reassess the system, it's going to be from top to bottom again. So even though, like your point was, will that get recontaminated, or will there be sediment that is transferred down that causes additional sheen? That is part of this iterative approach. That when we go back after this, we go through and employ these stream mitigation efforts, we're also going to go back and reassess this we're going to score it for sheen and ensure that we have the 0s and 1s. And then we're also going to be doing that sediment sampling and water sampling again.
Yeah,
like
it
a
makes
full
sense.
approach.
It just doesn't seem like it makes sense to work backwards, but I get it.
Yeah, there are entirely different approaches. A lot of time I would go to the the furthest end and work way backwards, and it's just the different approaches that are taken.
Other thoughts?
Where does the water that you're using to get into the side, where do you get that from?
From the creek.
So you just pull it off?
So we use it from the deeper part that's not that doesn't have any sheen on it. It was a good discussion. I had this with somebody yesterday because they're like, why aren't you just reusing sheen water? So we try to go to an area which is not part of the area that we're cleaning, and then we draw that water from a deeper area. And then if there's an area close that might be a feeder or something like that, we'll draw it from that area. But we draw it from lower and not draw it where there's any sheen. If there's any sheen present, we don't use that water. We move to another area. We just use long hoses and draw it from other areas.
Has anybody, this is probably hard to do, but when you see the sheen, how long does it take for it to settle back down into the sediment? You know what I'm saying? If you
Yeah.
added it right to the surface and didn't touch it, how many days or hours or minutes does it take to sink back down?
Yeah, and I turned to Bill for an expert opinion on that, but it's been my experience that it's more likely to volatilize off than it is to re-entrain. But there's no guarantees. Temperature plays a factor. Sunlight plays a factor. That water movement, temperature of the water plays a factor. So yeah.
Which really goes to a good point too, right? So that reassessment that I said that we're going to be doing, it's going to be later in the year, right? And so again, it might be a little bit cool right now, and the water temperatures haven't gotten as warm, so that's why when we do the reassessment, the water temperature will be even warmer, so that we can really ensure that we did do the job that we intended to do. But we don't want to wait until June to start this work, because if it takes months then we end up, pushing it into the fall. So we want to get a good head start on it, but that's part of the reason that we want to reassess it when we have the warmer temperatures, because it does tend to, it does tend to be a little bit more visible when it's warm out.
And to that point, Lindsay, when we issued the order in October to Norfolk Southern, the Clean Water Act order, we put them on a fast track to get us a work plan because we wanted to assess that area before we started to hit winter, while the water was still reasonably warm. So.
I got one more. It's got something to do with water, but not the creeks. Mark, I know that you said to have them E-tanks sit there is very expensive. They put tanks in. Why is there still so many E-tanks sitting in town?
The blue triangular tanks, they're starting to go away. As a matter of fact, last week they started going away. We finally got to the point where we've got enough capacity in what we call the CID tanks, which are the 6 tanks along Martin Street, on the north side of Martin Street, and the 2 large lake tanks, the 1 million gallon lake tanks. We finally got enough capacity and got enough water out of there where those are starting to go away. That footprint's going to get a lot smaller real soon. So
they're still using them
yeah,
until...
yeah, and it
We're still
mostly
using
for
some right now.
mostly for overflow, in case the big lake tanks and the
Okay, so they'll transport them over to the lake tanks as they need.
yeah, or they'll just pump off.
Yeah. So they get diverted into different ways. Yeah, but yeah, it's like yesterday's rain event. We collected over 1 million gallons of water. One day, over 1 million gallons of water.
On one of your slides, it said, the reassessment endpoints. And the last one was no exceedances in sediment of human health screening levels.
Yep.
Are there any now?
Yes, 2 locations, same compound, barely above the screening level. And to understand what the screening level means, it's the most conservative value. If somebody came into contact with that chemical, basically for a lifetime of exposure, there's an increased cancer risk of, I think it's 1 in a million. Our program usually deals with 1 in 10,000. We're an emergency response program. But again, this one, we're treating it more like a remedial site because of, the microscope's on this one, right? And so we're going to a much tighter standard within our acceptable range of risk, which is between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in a million. We're going to the 1 in a million, okay? So, and they're barely above that screening level. So we believe through this process, hopefully in the next round, everything will be below. Back in the summer, there were more. I think there were 4 or 5 that exceeded screening levels.
What chemical is that?
Benzoapyrene.
The black stuff on the bottom of your charbroiled steak, that's what that crap is. It's anthrazines, it's all coal tar compounds. And they're everywhere. So finding them in this stream, we found them in 2022.
So does that have to do with the derailment then?
Yeah, well, the lube oil has those compounds in them. So the way we look at it is it boils down to sheen, right? And that's why we keep bringing up the sheen, Linda. That's where we get our authority, and that's why we're doing this. Yeah. It's both. Yeah.
Sheen's like makeup.
That's glisten.
Benzoapyrene.
So we're at an hour and a half. We were only meant to go an hour, so I think we're going to wrap it up. But we'll hang around if you guys want to talk offline. I know you had a question about
What's pyridine?
water
right?
wells or something.
Pyrene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
there's another one called anthracene.
So
Pyrene. Sorry.
I hope this was
thought it was
helpful.
pyridine.
Was this helpful? Bonnie, it was helpful? Yeah, good. Good. No, thanks, guys. And, we can talk about doing another one as we progress through this. I think it's probably a good idea, right, to get together and talk. So, and again, this will be posted on our website. So, all right. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.